All right, we're all good, Rick?
You're being recorded.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Sandra Kay, and I'm from the Jersey Shore. I'm a compulsive eater, a sugar addict, and an alcoholic, and I've been asked to tell my story at this meeting. I have had a problem with food literally my entire life. One of my earliest memories as a toddler was dragging chairs, the kitchen chair over to the countertop, climbing up, and then climbing all the way on top of the refrigerator. Why? Because the cabinet with the cookies was over the refrigerator to keep them out of my mitts, except that by climbing chairs and countertops and refrigerators, I managed to get to them anyway. So I was pretty determined. I learned from a very young age to associate food, especially sweets, with rewards for being good. And I also learned that the absence of food, like when I was sent to bed without supper, was a punishment. So food was good, not having food meant I was bad and was a bad thing. My parents, especially my mom, had very high expectations for me, and they demanded a lot. I had to be good. I had to obey. I had to always be cheerful. I was not allowed to be sad or angry about anything. And of course, I had to get high grades. And when I didn't live up to these expectations, I was severely criticized, especially again by my mom and my grandmother. I was yelled at and I was even spanked. Now I know that there's varying opinions on corporal punishment, but I was spanked into my teens, and I severely disagree with that as a form of punishment. It just humiliated me. So eating was a way to bury my feelings and my profound disappointment in myself for not being the daughter that I thought I should be. I also did some cutting, and also at the age of 13, I made a suicide plan, but I never even attempted to carry it out. But that's how bad I felt. And of course, the compulsive eating brought about new problems. I was always criticized for my weight, both at home and at school. I was mocked and suffered some physical violence over the fact that I didn't fit in. At 13, I was put on a diet, which was the first of many, and I actually lost some weight, but I also had a growth spurt, which kind of evened out my weight. And that has reinforced my theory that I'm really not overweight, but I am under height. So now I was a normal weight in high school, and I could participate in sports finally. I do have some pictures. Let's see if we can do this. Yes. Okay. That's me at 11, little pot belly, little, not as fat as in my mind, not as fat as I thought I was. And that's been a real big problem with me too, is that in my mind, I have always been a lot heavier, especially at the younger age, than I actually was. I mean, I imagined myself as being a tremendously overweight child. And, at 11, that wasn't really that bad. But I couldn't participate in sports. I had asthma. And now that I was in high school and a normal weight, I participated in sports. I joined track and field. I started running. And I also developed an interest in karate and actually joined a dojo. And I entered the years of my life that I called heaven, because with all the exercise that I did, I could eat whatever I wanted in whatever quantity I wanted, and I didn't gain any weight. I stayed around 122 pounds. But my mental state wasn't that good. Despite being thin, that didn't solve any of my problems. I criticized myself. I called myself clumsy and stupid when I was neither. And I realize now that I was echoing my mother and my grandmother from years before. That was part of the verbal abuse that I got. And even in love, my grandmother's pet name for me was Dumb Bunny. Not quite an endearing pet name as she thought it was. After high school, I went away to college, and there I discovered alcohol. My parents had been teetotalers. So the only thing we had in the house was a bottle of Manischewitz Concord grape, which came out on holidays. And until I turned 18, I was not allowed to drink it. But I did throughout my life take little sips from the bottle, and being a good addict, I knew enough that I had to cover my tracks, so I'd put a little water back into the bottle. So throughout my life, if I haven't actually been compulsively eating or drinking, I have still exhibited the behaviors of an addict. But when I went away to college, I discovered alcohol and partying, and I very quickly became a weekend binge drinker. Alcohol and food did two different things. Alcohol made me the party girl, brought out my personality. I did karaoke. I did all kinds of crazy fun things. The food was for pushing down the feelings that I still felt, my feelings of inadequacy and low self-esteem, and was done in private. I kind of ate like a barbarian, and so I did not compulsively, as much as possible, I did not compulsively overeat in public, because I knew what I looked like when I compulsively overate. So that was an interesting thing that I understood about myself through journaling, was that alcohol and food did two different things. After college, my friends were all getting married, and my self-esteem was still so low that I pretty much, the first guy that came along and I dated and he asked me to marry him, I said yes. I guess I felt that there wasn't going to be any other chances. In fact, I knew that this was not the right thing to do, and I was extremely unhappy. And we went on a cruise for our honeymoon, and cruises, they're just nothing but nonstop food. And I binged so much on my honeymoon. I gained over 10 pounds in 7 days, and I pretty much ate myself to the point where I almost didn't fit into my clothes that I had brought with me. I got home, I continued to overeat. When I gained the weight, I had to stop the exercise, I had to stop running, I had to stop karate. And within a couple of years, I was well over 200 pounds. So I'm at least 220. I kind of stopped weighing myself, but you can see how tight my clothes are. I absolutely refused to buy sizes larger than size 20, but I needed larger sizes than that. So now I got on an endless treadmill of diets, losing weight, gaining weight. I used all the pay and ways. I used any fad diet that came across in a magazine. And I just went up and down the scale, constantly gaining and losing large amounts of weight. Our marriage, he was an alcoholic as well, but did not admit to that. And he liked to play with guns and knives, and unfortunately that was a bad combination. And the marriage ended with me getting the SWAT team to remove him out of our house. I immediately jumped into another relationship because that's what I did. I had such low self-esteem and thought so little of myself that I needed somebody with me to pay me attention and to love me and all of that. So I immediately got into a relationship. I did OptiFast at this time, and I lost a lot of weight, maybe about 70 pounds. But OptiFast didn't teach me how to eat. And when I stopped that program, my boyfriend, who became my second husband, was a chef in Atlantic City, and he knew how to cook. So he started cooking for me and I started eating again. And boy, I went right back up the scale. I had lost that weight in maybe about 5 months, and it took me less than 3 months to put it all back on. That was in 1990. This was also the year that I was introduced to Overeaters Anonymous by dear friends of mine. And it turns out that I loved OA, although I really didn't understand the whole concept of a 12-step program because I had such a diet mentality. So I couldn't grasp the steps. I didn't think any of them really applied to me. Yes, I had a problem with food, but my life wasn't unmanageable. I had a house and a car and a job and a husband. And, so I had it all. I certainly wasn't insane. I thought the world owed me an apology because everyone had done me wrong. So steps 4 through 9 were definitely out. But I got a sponsor and a food plan, which was actually Weight Watchers. And again, I lost a lot of weight and I went down to about 135 pounds. It didn't last. Half measures availed me nothing. And I gained the weight back. But this was me after Weight Watchers, about 1992. That's me and my 2 kitties. So I went right back up the scale as soon as I stopped doing the Weight Watchers, and I left OA because OA didn't work. Well, it didn't work. I was barely doing the program, and we say half measures avail us nothing. So it was just another attempt that ended in failure. My marriage devolved into simply being an eating, drinking, and my husband and I were eating, drinking, and pot smoking buddies. That's really all our relationship was, and we fought mostly when we were sober. On August 9th of 1997, we had the mother of all fights, and he stormed out of the house, leaving me weeping. And I cried out for help. And I actually heard a voice in the house. Now remember, I was alone, but I heard an audible voice say, "Go to a meeting." And I realized that it was God, my higher power, giving me the answer. Go back to OA. I immediately gave up the sugar and the pot, and I gave up alcohol because we all know that alcohol is just nothing but empty calories and sugar. At this point, I still had no idea that I had any problem with alcohol. I thought I was a social drinker, even though I was a weekend binge drinker. So I went to a strong meeting on Sunday. I got a temporary sponsor. I got a food plan. And 2 weeks later, my brain was absolutely screaming at me to go get some alcohol. And I admitted at this point that I also needed AA, and I claimed my seat there too. My husband was not happy about any of this because he lost his eating, drinking, pot smoking buddy. And according to him, I was no longer fun. In fact, he told me that he loved alcohol more than he loved me. And at that point, we decided to part and get an amicable divorce. I threw myself in the program and counseling. My permanent sponsor, who I got, she was a wonderful person. She was also an AA, so she was kind of a dual sponsor. She said to me, you need Al-Anon too. So now I was working 3 programs. That and the counseling kept me very busy, and I really, really worked program. I went to a meeting a day for over a year, and then scaled off a little, but I was still between 3 programs going to a lot of meetings. One of the main things was I realized that my relationships with men had been warped and dangerous at some times. And so I did not have a relationship at all in these 2 years. I called them the years of Sandra, and I basically just worked on myself. I did program, I did counseling, I went back to church. I did all those things that were good for me, and I grew. And after 2 years, I finally decided that I was ready to start dating. This was 1999, and I met Paul, who became my third and last husband. Dated for 2 years, and we married in 2001. Our relationship was started in recovery. We met in the rooms of OA. He had about 11 more years of sobriety than me. So I knew he had a lot of recovery. We had a recovery marriage. We had a recovery wedding, no alcohol. And we had a cake, but that wasn't for us. We fed each other sugar-free Jell-O. And it was a terrific marriage, and I remained abstinent until around 2009, when both of us had lost our jobs by this time because of the bad economy. Paul became disabled, and I suddenly had no time for meetings or meal plans or prep or service. I very slowly lost program, and the food was the last thing. I started picking up foods I hadn't eaten in over a decade, and I lost my abstinence. And it started a very painful period of about 13 years where I had abstinence and relapse, abstinence and relapse. In 2016, I actually had 11 months of abstinence, and then Paul was diagnosed with esophageal cancer, and I went into super savior mode. Everything was for him. We went to hospitals and doctors. He had surgery, he had aftercare, he had radiation. And I basically completely forgot about myself, and everything was for him. Well, he went into a remission, but the doctor was brutally honest and said, make a bucket list and do stuff on it, because esophageal cancer's got a very poor success rate. And so we did. And we both also stayed in OA, but we had very little abstinence. At the end of 2018, he was diagnosed with cancer again and passed away in February of 2019. At this point, I completely fell apart, and I alternated between starving myself, literally living on nothing but coffee with a little cream and sweet and low in it. And then when my appetite came back, I would binge like crazy. I cursed God. I cursed my life. I asked why. I acted like I was the only person in the entire world who had ever lost their spouse. I got gastric bypass at the end of 2019. Again, I was beginning to reach out to alternatives to OA, the pain ways, gastric sleeve. I tried to get the easier, softer way without going back to OA. At the end of 2019, I said, thank goodness this year is over. 2020 will be a better year. Well, we all know what 2020 was like, COVID, and I was an EMT. So starting in March, I was taking COVID patients, multiple COVID patients on a daily basis to the hospital, and I was terrified. My company ran out of equipment. We were issued one mask for an entire week. We had to make do. We didn't have any gowns. So it was just, I was terrified, and I was binging, especially on sugar. The meetings closed down, and I no longer had to feel guilty about leaving OA. But AA very quickly appeared on Zoom, and I started going to an AA Zoom meeting daily, and I realized that I couldn't ignore OA anymore. So in late 2020, I found this meeting, Bridge from AA to OA. I was intrigued by that title. And it was here that I heard about another meeting, Better Together, which was an every night speaker meeting. I was attending 2 OA meetings, so I guess I was officially back in OA. In 2020, I turned 65 and I retired as a paid EMT. And as 2020 came to a close, I was looking forward to 2021 being a better year. I need to stop saying that, because 2021 turned out not to be a better year. My mom fell down a flight of stairs right before Christmas 2020, and when she came out of the hospital, she was permanently in a wheelchair, had a diagnosis of advanced dementia, and needed assisted living. So I put her in a nice place, and she hated it, and she hated me, and she called me repeatedly throughout the days to tell me so. And one day she called me 40 times to tell me what a bad daughter I was. And the memories of a childhood of criticism and verbal abuse overwhelmed me, and I found myself again crying and hating God and my life. And I couldn't stop binging on sugar and junk food to squash the feelings. I screamed at my mother, I hung up on her, all actions that I was ashamed of but couldn't stop doing. I realized that I desperately needed counseling again, and I got on a wait list for a local counseling center. Meanwhile, my dear sister-in-law, whom many of you know, Lisa, came up to visit at about the same time in July of 2021. And we did a lot of sightseeing. We went to the beach. And at night, we watched movies surrounded by boxes and bags of chips and junk food. And we bemoaned the fact that we were both overweight and couldn't lose weight. But we were stuffing our faces with the junk food while we were saying this. Now, Lisa has about 9 years more sobriety than me. And by the way, I have her permission to include her in my story. So we devised a fitness challenge, which was patterned after program, a food and exercise plan, which was the physical, a devotional plan, which was the spiritual, and we would call and text each other throughout the week to support each other. I also told her about my 2 Zoom OA meetings, and she started attending here, and then she also started attending Better Together. Late summer, the counseling center called me, and I started 4 months of very intensive counseling, mostly inner child work. So between the OA meetings, AA meetings, the fitness challenge, and the counseling, I got in a program, got a sponsor in 2022, worked the steps with her, and I started losing weight. And on September 4th of 2022, I became abstinent, and I now maintain about 30 pounds lost. So I've been abstinent for a little over a year. So what's it like now? Well, I'm very busy with my face-to-face AA meeting. I give service to my Zoom OA meetings. I volunteer as an EMT. I give service at my church. My mom's dementia has progressed to a psychotic dementia. She has occasional breaks with reality, and she's on more meds. So she doesn't really call me continually throughout the day anymore. And when she does call, I treat her with love and dignity. I can do that now that I'm no longer binging on sugar. My home is no longer cluttered and a place of chaos. It's a nice, quiet, clean place of serenity. I take good care of myself. I'd like to close with some words from Thomas Merton. Like him, I have no idea where I'm going, and I am uncertain of the road ahead. But my God, my higher power, leads me down that road, so I am content and at peace. And the fact that I think I am doing God's will does not mean that I am actually doing it, but I know my desire and my attempt pleases God. And if I place myself in His hands every day and listen for His guidance, I know everything will be okay, and that fills me with joy. With that, thank you very much for letting me share.
Yay, thank you.